So recently I've been receiving a lot of questions, especially when streaming, all asking about my opinion on the current surge of powerful archetype specific skills being released by Konami. Stuff like Onomatopoeia, Demon's Resonance, Flight Control, Galaxy Photon, Shooting Star Road, and of course the latest of these skills, Relinquished Puppet. These skills have managed to become a rather heated debate in the community recently, with a ton of people asking questions like, are these skills healthy for the game, or are these skills just killing duel links? Well, to answer those questions, to put it simply, do I think these skills are bad for the game? No. Not at all. But before I get into why, just a friendly reminder that if you do enjoy these kinds of discussion type videos or find this kind of content useful in any way, please consider hitting the like button down below and subscribing to the channel whilst you're down there. It's completely free and you can unsub at any time. Alright, so before I go into why I think these skills are not only good for the game, but exceptionally healthy, just a heads up, as I know a lot of people tend to only watch like 3 minutes of the video and just straight jump into the comment section to write rather mean things. I will be covering the cons and problems with these skills later in the video too. I just want to go through the positives first, as in my opinion they vastly outweigh the negatives. Alright, let's jump into the positives. So there are a couple of main reasons why these skills are really good for the game, and the first, and by far the most important of these, is consistency is fun and healthy for a card game. Let me try to explain. So in balancing a deck, you mainly look at two things: how consistent is the deck, and how powerful are the card effects within it. So for example, if we're talking about Cyber Angel, we're talking about consistency, we're referring to powerful searches like Cyber Petite Angel, and we're referring to just powerful effects, I'd be referring to Dakini's non-target send removal. So obviously, if a deck has a lot of power, but isn't very consistent, it won't be played. Likewise, if a deck is extremely consistent, but doesn't really offer enough power, it will just suck. So this is where most of the balancing comes from. So here's where my main argument comes from. A consistent meta is always going to be more fun than a powerful meta. For example, if a deck exists which has an absurd amount of power, where if they get that combo off you either just lose instantly or are left to play against an unbreakable board. Obviously, if you play against this, you're not going to have a good time, as you just cannot play the game. Now let's say Konami introduced a nerf, and the way they decided to balance this deck was instead of reducing its power, they lowered its consistency. So it just full on brick 50% of the time, to a point where they are just unable to make a play. Now if you were able to play against this deck, you wouldn't lose instantly, and you wouldn't have to deal with an unbreakable board 50% of the time, but nothing here has actually changed, as although you can play the game now, you are still left with one player not able to play. And in a PvP focused card game, if one of the two players is participating in a spectator sport whilst the other is playing solitaire, it's not exactly much of a battle, is it? It kind of ruins the whole point of playing the game. Now let's say in the same situation, they nerfed the power level of the deck instead of its consistency. So now it was unable to completely obliterate you and you could no longer make an unbreakable board state, but it was still so consistent that every single game without fail it would make a very decent board and it will be a challenge to survive going against the deck. Now if you play against it, you would at least have a duel on your hands, where even though it may be slightly harder or one of the players is just slightly favoured, at least both players do end up battling, and an actual game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played. Nobody is just steamrolled, and nobody just bricks. And this is why I love the skills currently being added by Konami, as the vast majority of them are just anti-brick skills designed to force each deck to no longer brick. So whenever you come across a deck like TG playing Flight Control, you know you're going to be playing as the TG player playing a deck at its best, with no excuses of bricking or unplayable hand. It will just be his strategy versus your strategy, and his gameplay versus your gameplay, to see who comes out on top. A consistent meta is a meta where Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually played at its best, provided of course that there isn't some absurd power level of each deck being played. Another advantage of these skills existing is that stuff that would normally be considered completely garbage actually becomes playable. A great example of this would be the new gimmick puppet skill, Relinquished Puppet. Gimmick puppets at the moment, as it stands in Duel Links, are just not a very good deck at a competitive level, as the cards we've been given have proven to just not be strong enough in the current metagame. But this doesn't stop the deck being a lot of fun anyway, just at a rogue level, and this is all thanks to the fact Konami gave us a skill that takes all these pretty average cards and forces them to be playable in every single duel. This deck just cannot brick. The skill literally makes it so no matter what combo of cards you have in your starting hand, most of the time anyway, obviously you can still get extremely unlucky, you are going to be given a bunch of cards that will be summonable and will allow you to try and go into your boss monsters and fulfill the strategy the deck is designed to do. Even if the strategy isn't that special or overpowered, at least you get to perform it every single game. The next major advantage of these skills is they are simply just more fun than playing anything generic. Anyone who considers themselves a bit of a Duel Links boomer will remember times where a vast majority of the metagame was just either beat down or ties that binds. And these skills, in my opinion, are just really boring. They don't offer any inherent deck building strats, they don't offer some unique effect that benefits your strategy in particular. All these skills would do is boost your attack by a small amount, and people would use these skills because there simply was just no better alternatives. It was like every deck had its own copy of Jurassic World activated, and the funny thing is, this field spell was actually one of the popular skills used back in the OG days of Duel Links. At least now, when we are given skills like Relinquished Puppet, Set Delta XL, Shooting Star Road, or even Ultimate Dragons, we're given something fun and unique to play with, something we can design decks and combos around. Stuff that is obviously a hell of a lot more interesting than just, oh, here's a 300 attack boost. Now for the final advantage of playing these skills. They are simply easier for Konami to control and balance. Since these skills only impact one deck, when Konami does decide to nerf them, they are only going to be impacting one deck. You remember a few months back when they nerfed balance, and it caused a huge angry mob to form in just about every Duel Links forum or comment section? That's because although the skill was absolutely game breaking for Noble Knights, the skill was also just the best skill for a bunch of other decks in the game, such as Mage. So when it was deleted from existence to deal with the Noble Knight problem, it indirectly nerfed a ton of other decks that weren't a problem. This just isn't a problem with unique skills. You nerf them, you're nerfing one deck. There is nobody else caught in the crossfire. And obviously, let's not forget that when you do nerf a skill, you don't have to nerf any cards. So if a deck is OP because of a skill, at least by nerfing the skill, you won't feel like your gem investment or digging for 3 times of any card is suddenly wasted due to a ban list taking those cards away from you. Your deck will get weaker obviously, but at the very least, you won't have any cards taken away from you. Alright, now that I've shown you guys the pros, let me briefly cover the cons as well, as obviously there are 2 pretty inherent problems, especially with the way Konami is currently implementing these skills. First of all, why the fuck does Onomata Play and Demon's Resonance have 2 uses per duel? See, I'm all for these decks being extremely consistent, having strong opening hands, and for both Onomats and Resonators, my opinions don't exactly change. Now where I start to have an issue is when a deck can fully unload a combo, dumping their entire hand, but not have any way to actually punish this. A deck like Onomats that unloads its entire hand, making a pretty strong board or attempting an OTK, should have a pretty big weakness of being, if you prevent that OTK, or if its board is broken, it should just have a hard time recovering. But as it currently stands, for whatever reason, Onomata Play enables the deck to have a consistent, insane starting combo, and access to a full recovery plan by simply using the skill again to find Gaga Head. This is dumb. Same goes for Resonator, being able to just research a Wildwind after searching for one on the previous turn. These skills should be used as a consistency boost or a recovery boost. Not both. That's really dumb. But luckily it's also a really easy fix. Just make both these skills once per duel. If you can only use them once, it forces players to choose between an optimal starting hand or potentially a follow-up later on. Not both. The second issue with these skills is, as they are all currently tied to characters, it means you end up with anime-only decks receiving the cool unique skills, which can kinda suck. Now this is an issue that is honestly quite a hard one to fix, and if you guys have any ideas, feel free to share them in the comments down below, as to be honest, this is the only actual argument I've seen people give that is generally a good argument against archetype specific skills. Obviously not enough to sway my opinion, but definitely a problem I think it's worth Konami taking a look at. I don't think this problem necessarily matters in terms of consistency issues, as it just means Konami needs to make sure to be careful when releasing non-anime art types, to give them enough consistency supporting cards to make sure they don't suck. But it does feel like a bit of a shame that non-anime decks will never be given any fun, unique skills that offer new ways to play them. Maybe they should just start adding unique skills for art types, but making them just buyable from the card trader, that can be used on anyone and buyable with skill tickets. Or maybe a more realistic option would just be for more unique fun skills like Xyz Evolution to be released, which is still fairly unique in that only a few decks can use it, but it's generic enough where it isn't locked to an art type. I don't know, I don't really have a good answer for this one, but feel free to leave your ideas down below. In summary, the pros in my opinion completely decimate the cons on this one. Unique skills are more fun, offer easier options for balancing, allow garbage decks to be playable, and make the meta just overall more consistent, leading to a lot more strategy versus strategy, and not just which of these two players avoided the brick. Alright guys, that's it for this little discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed it or found it useful. If you did, please consider leaving a like down below and subscribing to the channel whilst you're down there. Thanks for watching, laters.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.